about the WNBA.
The WNBA Finals should have been the peak of women's basketball, right? All the passion, drama, and superstar power featuring players like Wilson and DeWanna Bonner should have made it feel like the biggest event in the league. But honestly, the real story began when the teams walked into those arenas and saw rows and rows of empty seats. What was supposed to be the most exciting stage in the WNBA season ended up creating an uncomfortable image. Instead of packed arenas and an electric atmosphere, the empty sections became impossible to ignore. For a league trying to reach a bigger audience and capitalize on the growing popularity of women's basketball, that was a pretty embarrassing look.
Y'all don't care. I think y'all care about the drama around it. I do believe that, but I don't think you care about the events itself. And judging by ticket prices, neither does anybody.
Look, there were simply no fans in the stands. And here's the frustrating part. Ticket prices were high, yet none of the buzz we saw around Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever seemed to be there. It was more than embarrassing. It was genuinely frustrating for two of the best players in the game. You could see their frustration on camera, and their comments about the empty seats were impossible to miss. But underneath all that anger was a bigger concern. Had the WNBA's momentum started to fade? The contrast was hard to ignore. When Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever were drawing massive attention, the league felt like it had a completely different level of energy surrounding it. Without Clark on the biggest stage, some fans began asking an uncomfortable question. Had the WNBA become too dependent on one superstar to generate attention? That's where the empty seats became more than just an embarrassing visual. They became part of a much bigger conversation about the league's popularity, star power, and where its momentum goes from here.
If ever there was proof that the Caitlin Clark fans / Fever fans are now the overwhelming majority of the fandom, look at ticket prices for finals games.
You'd think there would be enormous excitement surrounding the WNBA Finals. We're talking about two incredible teams, loaded with elite talent and MVP-level players, all battling for a championship. But as game day got closer, something just felt off. There were no packed arenas, no sports bars buzzing with fans, and no viral moments dominating social media. Instead, fans were stunned when they checked the ticket sites. Tickets for what should have been the biggest stage in women's basketball were reportedly going for as little as $30. That's when the situation started to feel surreal. The championship stage was supposed to be filled with passionate fans, energy, and excitement. Instead, the low ticket prices raised a very different question. Was the WNBA Finals actually heading toward a ghost town?
Game 1, the get-in price for Game 1 matchup between the Aces and the Mercury for a WNBA Finals game. Holy hell, there's $35 seats right there. Right there. Plenty of good seats available.
Listen, Wilson, the MVP and face of the Las Vegas Aces, simply couldn't hide her disappointment. She expected the finals to be loud, packed, and filled with non-stop energy. But during warm-ups, when she looked around and saw row after row of empty red seats, she reportedly muttered to herself, "This is the finals?" It didn't come across as arrogance. It looked more like genuine disbelief. For a player who had worked all season to reach the biggest stage in the league, seeing so many empty seats during a finals game had to be a difficult sight. And that moment captured the bigger problem perfectly. The atmosphere didn't match the importance of the event.
Get that. Wow. $35 whole. This might be the best part of the video for the WNBA, because when you gauge the interest, to gauge the interest of this series, and it was
Players like Wilson and Bonner have spent years working to make this league bigger and more respected. Yet there they were, playing in front of scattered fans while cameras repeatedly captured the empty sections throughout the arena. And DeWanna Bonner didn't hold back. You could see her frustration during the post-game interviews following Game 1. Despite all the hard work her team had put in to reach the finals, the lack of energy in the building was impossible to ignore. She reportedly put the feeling into words, saying, "You work your entire career for moments like this, and you just hope people care enough to show up." That quote captured the emotion perfectly. For players who dedicate their careers to reaching the biggest stage, the finals are supposed to feel special. When the seats are empty and the crowd is quiet, it can make all that hard work feel strangely disconnected from the attention they expected. And that's what made the empty arenas such a difficult image for the league.
DeWanna Bonner, Alyssa Thomas, and the Mercury in the finals against Asia Wilson and the Aces. Will you be locked in watching this series? Question mark. Yes or no? Hit the poll. 4% of brave souls said yes. 96% said hail to the...
The players on the court were starting to realize in real time that the league's excitement might have been more fragile than they thought. And it wasn't just the players noticing. Fans quickly took to social media to point out the lack of energy inside the arena. Photos showing empty seats began circulating widely, sparking heated debates about what had gone wrong. Some people pointed to one major name missing from the finals, while others blamed the league's marketing strategy and high ticket prices. And here's where the situation gets especially interesting. Throughout the season, rookie Caitlin Clark had generated enormous interest in women's basketball. Her games with the Indiana Fever consistently attracted major TV audiences and helped drive significant attention to the league. But without Clark in the finals, the atmosphere seemed noticeably different. The question was no longer simply about empty seats. It was whether the WNBA had become too dependent on one superstar to maintain the same level of attention and excitement.
As if the Fever and Caitlin Clark was playing in a finals game, let's say against the Mercury, with all that drama around there, would there be a single ticket less than $300? Now, I mean, honestly, a single ticket less than $300. I don't think so. I think you'd have courtside seats go for $5,000. If Caitlin Clark was playing, if she was in these finals along with the...
League executives, however, tried to put a positive spin on the situation. They wanted to frame the finals as a battle between two historic franchises, but many fans simply weren't buying it. They wanted compelling stories, raw emotion, and a reason to truly care about what was happening on the court. And this time, the league struggled to create that connection. The finals were supposed to represent the highest level of competition in women's basketball. Instead, they appeared to expose an uncomfortable truth. The WNBA's appeal was still heavily connected to a handful of superstar personalities. By the end of Game 1, much of the expected momentum seemed to be missing. People online were even calling it one of the quietest finals atmospheres the league had seen. The atmosphere inside the arena wasn't evidence of a lack of talent. The players were still competing at the highest level. What was missing was the sense of community and energy surrounding the event. There simply weren't enough fans in the building to create the electric atmosphere a final series should have. And Wilson and DeWanna Bonner appeared genuinely frustrated by that reality.
You are not invested, you are not interested in watching this BS transpire on your television sets.
What was supposed to be a proud moment for Wilson and DeWanna Bonner after Game 1 instead turned into a much more uncomfortable conversation. Both veterans had given everything to reach the championship. They had spent years building their careers and fighting to make the WNBA bigger. But instead of roaring applause, packed arenas, and flashing cameras, they were met with awkward silence and rows of empty seats. The WNBA had promised growth, respect, and greater attention for the game. Yet on this night, it felt like the league had suddenly taken a step backward. For Wilson and Bonner, this wasn't simply about attendance numbers. It was about feeling abandoned by the very fans they hoped would finally rally behind the league. Wilson's frustration became clear during the post-game press conference. She remained calm, but her words carried plenty of weight. "We're playing some of the best basketball out there," she said. "But it's like nobody's watching." That statement captured the frustration perfectly. National coverage appeared limited, social media engagement wasn't generating the same level of buzz, and game clips struggled to create the kind of viral attention that followed Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever throughout the season. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Bonner, meanwhile, didn't hold back. She was direct, emotional, and unapologetic. "It's disrespectful. We are worthy of crowded arenas. We are worthy of experiencing such energy. Her comments quickly sparked debate across social media. Some fans sympathized with her, arguing that the league's marketing had failed to connect with what fans actually wanted to see. Others pushed back, claiming that Bonner and other veterans had contributed to divisions within the fan base. And that's when the story became much bigger. What started as frustration over poor attendance turned into a broader conversation about the WNBA's growing challenges, its marketing strategy, its superstar-driven popularity, and the difficulty of keeping the same level of attention when Caitlin Clark wasn't part of the biggest event. The empty seats were no longer just an embarrassing visual. They had become a symbol of a much deeper question. Can the WNBA sustain its momentum without relying so heavily on a handful of superstar names? For Wilson and Bonner, the frustration was clearly about more than an empty arena. They wanted their biggest stage to feel like a championship should feel: loud, packed, electric, and full of fans who genuinely cared. Instead, the silence became impossible to ignore.